Here we go again. Oh, to pick up is one little piece of unfinished business. I was giving credit for Kyroots' last show on his wardrobe, so we can our trade outs. I forgot one. I also meant to give credit. It was Kyroots' underwear is courtesy of Fredericks of Inglewood. Here we go. Oh, we got 2 nights. I didn't mark off last time.
Huh?
We got 2 columns.
Oh no, that one I had to switch up. Ignore this. This one. Okay.
Okay, here we go. Fredericks of Inglewood. just in case you run across Sam Giesenslaw, that'll make him. Well, these 2 are connected. Somebody requested page 2 an additional comment, but page 1 and page 2 are connected, so I'm going to read them both. And Kyroots said, all laws, even scientific, are shackles and blinders, even if they work. And Kyroots said, all popular ideas started out as prunes. And of course, seeing how those are connected, it's obvious I don't have to make any additional comment. All right, think about it then. Tell me they're not. Popular ideas, not scientific, not important. Well, they could be important, because when it gets down to the level of ordinary, the collective wisdom of humanity, even if you don't look at it this way, you might think that there's a difference between popular ideas, that Kyroot might have meant something else, but how about now people just common, you can find graffiti in the bathroom at a country place having to do with Einstein's equation concerning the transfer from energy to mass. You can find dirty things put in a bathroom having to do with Einstein's theory of relativity. It is now popular. Forget whether people understand it. It is now a popular idea. It is something that is bandied about. Kyroots simply points out that all popular ideas of whatever nature, to expand upon it, artistic, social, scientific, psychological, they started out as prunes. Now, I know you laughed once or twice. Some of you have a very low threshold for humor, I know. But if you're past that, consider the fact. They start out as prunes, you can laugh and say, how ridiculous. Oh yeah, well, what they start out as? Popular ideas, ideas that finally become, in the widest possible range, not just definition, but the connotation of the word popular. If they didn't start out as prunes, what did they start out as? You can write me and tell me, but please, no cards from Germany. It would only be from there I figured they could get a bomb and a postcard. Well, this one's a little too, I don't think I'll read that one. And Kyroots said, anything in the secondary world can be temporarily replaced by talk, permanently by seriousness. This is, may I suggest, an expansion on several things. The basic fact that there is no such thing as a secondary world without talk. There's no such thing as civilization without talk. There's no such thing as any singularity, man, apropos a hippo, without talk. And we've been through some of this, but it is meaningful, not just for me to try and promote Kyroots' definition of it. But as you know, ever since we've had civilization, people have been trying to define what civilization is, all the way from that civilization, in a sense, was agriculture. That had not man begun to plant food in one locale rather than wandering about, that he would never had time to sit down and think, I believe I'll become civilized and quit spitting on people. And it's been described as civilization equals the arts. That was only when man began to have some notion of decorating his cave, or that civilization is operationally equitable to religion. That until man began to have dreams of gods and some sense of morality, all of that, it has some basis. But no matter, all of that can be swallowed by the great talking fish, or the great talking whale can swallow all of the smaller fishes, because none of what I just pointed out that other people's already done. There is no agriculture, there is no, believe it or not, no art, there is no religion, none of that until man's nervous system got up to the penthouse. It got to the end, up in the frontal lobes, and it went, wow, I can talk. Until it could do that, there was no such thing as civilization. There were not any manifestations of it. There was not any operational difference, if we're going to play the game of sequential three-dimensional evolution, just for a fact, for discussional fact, that up until that point, there was no great difference between man and whoever you want to compare him to, a baboon, an attorney, or whatever. It was only when he could talk. So now, Kyroots, so you got to, if you're going to take this kind of view to try to see it in a certain way, then you got to remember that we're now talking about the fourth big S, after shelter and sustenance and sex. If you want to look at that as being the primary world, all of its smaller engines, everything, absolutely everything required to run the primary world, looking at the primary world as being man, to play the sequential non-civilized backup game, back before man was civilized and he was no more than a baboon, Neanderthal man. If he had no talking intellect, then at that point, the same things kept him alive that kept baboons alive, that kept orangutans alive, and that was him individually and collectively, was sex, protecting himself from the night-eye of the environment, and sleep, and food. But the thing then that is required would be what amounted to a fourth S, since it works out that way in English, and that's speech. So that being the grand basis of this, back to the Kyroot, anything in the secondary world can be temporarily replaced by talk. And what this gets to, unless of course you're serious and sane, is that in the secondary world, anything can be replaced by talk. But then you've got to realize that anything in the secondary world, see, people, when you first hear that, even if you took it theoretically, you think, well, anything can be replaced by talk about in a different way. Whatever it is to begin with, whatever it is in the secondary world can be replaced by talk. And you could say, well, to take a piece of art, to take a symphony, to take the Catholic Church, to take a socialist theory of the state, you could say, well, that cannot simply be replaced by talk. It would have to be replaced by something, not making a qualitative judgment, but it would have to be replaced by something of a similar genre or ilk, and it does not. Because it can be replaced by talk, period. But then you've got to realize, well, wait a minute. That's no great news flash if you ever see it, because all it is talk to start with. Now, regardless of the fact that the state may have soldiers, that may own buildings, regardless of the fact that the symphony may be actually written down in a score, it may be for sale on a CD, you can say that there is a physical manifestation of whatever it is, of the state, of a religion. But it can be replaced by talk, because that's all it is to start with. Once you realize that it is nothing but a manifestation of talk, and if you don't like that, just imagine, could Beethoven, could anybody have written music that could not talk? Could any art be done? Could anybody play politics? Could anybody do anything without talk? And so no matter how obscure it may appear to an ordinary, untrained, civilized mind, anything in the secondary world, anything that man has that is unique to him, is an offshoot, is absolutely responsible, is absolutely beholden to talk. So then to say, well, you've got to, if you're going to play that one thing in the civilized world can be replaced by talk, you're just saying that one form of art could be replaced by another. Or Christianity could be replaced by Islam. It can be replaced by talk. The specifics of it's irrelevant. Unless, of course, you're ordinary, and that's not irrelevant. That's why a Christian will punch a Muslim in the mouth, because it's not irrelevant. Or a socialist will say, get those fascists away from me. Get those Democrats away from me. To them it's serious, but it's talk. Kyroot goes a little further. Anything in the secondary world can be temporarily replaced by talk, permanently by seriousness. Once you understand that, is part of what we were trying to talk about last time, seriousness will cover up almost anything. That if the talk doesn't seem to do it, if the talk of you trying to replace instead of just physically perhaps assaulting a Buddhist and trying to assault him and turn him into a Hindu, if that was what your persuasion was, or if you were a Christian Democrat trying to take on somebody of the Conservative Party, instead of that, of you being specific, trying to replace his name for religion with your name, it doesn't even matter what. All you got to do is get super serious. Maybe you say, well, you made a mistake being a Buddhist. What you should be is be a Zoroaster, be a Zarathustra. And the guy think, well, hell, you can't even pronounce it. Why should I? As old as the religion is, even starting with that great letter Z, the man can't even pronounce it. But, we went through this last time. The guy that put his faux pas foot into trying to describe the current unpleasantness in the Balkan regions. All you got to do is get super serious. You can do it yourself. You can jump on the guy. Wait a minute. You're taking the wrong tack. What do you care whether I can pronounce the name of the religion? The name is nothing. That's nothing. It is the teaching. It is the spirit. It is the... All you got to do is be serious, and the guy will find. I don't mean you'll convert him over to being a Zarathustra. But at least he'll give up trying to argue with you. Because seriousness will eventually, permanently replace anything if you push it far enough. Any of you, I wasn't going to do it, but any of you that are interested in the hobby of history, if you look at a certain way, much that quite civilized, reasonable, intellectual people, what they find to be gross, inexplicable anomalies in history, there's no way to look at it can be explained in one way. That people try to take historical movements, politically, economically, religiously, and look back and say, how could this one group, Group A over here, was doing well, pushing right along, helping civilization move forward, and then Group B came along, and they were obviously less kempt, less couth, less intelligent, and in some way, they overcame Group A. And it's just a hobby, but by talk, they will dissect it in a myriad of ways. And what if you looked at it this way? Group B simply over-serious Group A. Because seriousness will eventually, permanently, of course permanently I mean for that time, will replace whatever it wants to. There is nothing that can withstand in the secondary world extreme seriousness. Now you might, if you were following that, try and take it to some ridiculous way, like, well, it's always the real aggressive who are the most serious. You say, well, it's the real serious that are prepared to go out and kill and die and turn themselves into cannon fodder. I always like doing that if you're following this, because ordinary people, if I'm playing both parts, ordinary people go, well, what the hell does that mean? And what it means is, well, you're not listening. Because as far as they're concerned, they just proved their point, and may I suggest there's an alternate view. Not to them, because they go, what? Seriousness cannot be withstood by secondary minds. But then it ends up historically, or even during one's lifetime, sociologically, psychologically speaking, that people say, how could one person adopt this attitude? How could one person submit to this cult? How could one reasonable person become a communist? How could one person who one time had been a decent, God-fearing Jew become a Christian and a Baptist at that? And all that, taken to the ordinary view, you can look at their position. So that's weird. It makes no sense sociologically. It makes no sense to our psychological minds if we're ordinary, such as, well, as the child, if you try to devote some of your attention to your child, he should not grow up this way. She should not turn out this way. And you go, well, it's just inexplicable. That's just a hobby to say it's inexplicable. That's just a hobby to say, how could this happen? Because you can, and they will be doing it to go along rightly with the hobby, they can describe that this should not have occurred in a reasonable situation. The dynamics of one theory against another, one group of ideas or one idea against another, this person was sane. We know their background, or this group of people, Group A, were sane, decent people, and they should not have fallen for this. Are you following? And you can take their view. You can see there's that level. They say it is absolutely inexplicable with a capital N. Except for this. That is that. In the secondary world, nothing will withstand extreme seriousness. And if any of you want any further proof of this, the secondary world, of course, always, in a sense, is just the paint job on the car. Look at it this way. If you find any fault with that, let's move down to the basement, to the primary world. Then do you not have to immediately see that in the primary world, there's not even a question about anything resisting seriousness. That's not the term they ordinarily use. But if a tiger meets a wildebeest, and the tiger is hungry, that's a serious matter. We're talking about serious primary matters. And the wildebeest tries to tell him a joke. Or tries to do a funny dance, you know. And the tiger is seriously hungry, which qualifies as being serious. Who will prevail? How about this? Two tigers run up, come in, and there's a wildebeest. And one of them's hungrier than the other. Who's going to win? Just generally speaking, the one who is more seriously hungry. It is not that far removed into the secondary world, but there are reasons. There are reasons for the mind not to look at it that way. And part of the basis that Kyroots used several nights ago, that if people understood what was going on, what's going on wouldn't go on any longer. And so people do not. They should not. As you know, this is not to win people over to this kind of thinking or any terms. But people are not supposed to think about it that way. It is supposed to be part of what I was referring to as the hobby. It's supposed to be people discussing after the fact, historically, psychologically, sociologically, politically, of them discussing why would one group act in this way which patently, to our reasonable view, is not in their best interest, is not sane, is not logical. Why would they do this? And on the basis of that game, they're correct in saying it is absolutely beyond our comprehension. It is, except for this. Seriousness prevailed. And they would take my terms, I went through all that, if they had any reason to listen for a few minutes, they would take my terms metaphorically about the tigers. That, all right, in the physical world, whoever's the most serious in a sense will win. And you can even ease it up a little. How about sports among mortals? That whoever's the most serious will train the hardest. Assuming that, physically speaking, the two runners, two pole vaulters are more or less equal. Whoever's the more serious is going to win the goal. Whoever got there and jump, run, train. Steroid. They would go along with that, perhaps, and say, well, I see what you're saying. And there is something deeper to this, is what Kyroots was pointing out a few nights ago, about how everyone is born a different height, and yet everyone believes that there's an ideal height, even though they can't agree on what it is. That's what this is. That they would agree that even that animals, that there is a way, if they would take my terms for just a second, they'd go, all right, you're right. What you're calling seriousness will prevail. And to take it up a little higher into the world, let us say, of sports, to use it as a metaphor, but they would say, literally, I can see what you mean about the more serious of the athletes. And even collectively, the more serious, if the Raiders turn out to be more serious, if their black uniforms or the Falcons really do them any good, and they get more serious than those sissy New York, or the Patriots. I mean, what kind of name is that? So even if collectively, if one group gets more serious, or maybe the Germans decide, maybe we should arm ourselves again. And I don't think we've got any great question about who's going to be serious. Now look over at the French, who talk funny to begin with. We have historical precedent about what's going to happen. And anyway, ordinary minds would go along perhaps that far and say, all right, into that low level of man, you're right, what you're saying, metaphorically at least, is the more serious will prevail. The more serious an athlete is, the more you'll train, etc. But then the ordinary mind, is it supposed to? Will dig its heels in if you try to push it up the metaphorical building any further out of the basement, out of the physical men, out of athletics, and say the arts, the world of the mind, theories, laws, morality. Up here, nothing will withstand extreme seriousness. I mean, you can be serious. One religion can be serious. One political system can be as serious, I was going to say as a fat man that hadn't screwed in about 30 years, but I'm not even sure what that means, but real serious. But if something else comes along that's more serious, the original seriousness cannot withstand it. Your mind will not accept that. There is, way down here in the Kyroots, which we obviously won't get to, but it was pointing out that one of the striking characteristics of the secondary world is its ability to absolutely ignore the obvious. It's not an attack. It's a sterling, striking, most excellent characteristic of its ability to just absolutely be oblivious, ignore the obvious. It has to. That was the end of that verse. It has to. That always sounds nice. Do those people on cable go for that? You will have to send me. Oh. Those regular preachers on TV have the same degree of success I have doing that? Well, obviously not. They're on the air. Well, after doing this a dozen times, you realize, you know how much I've received in contributions from you people out there every time I told you I was going to die or whatever it was? Yes. It starts with a Z, and it's not Zarathustra. This was several connected. If you'd like to hear it, I know one of them was sort of hard to hear. Gary read it right, but it was really three connected. It was a definition from Kyroots. Yet another one, yes, of civilization. The turning of processes into things and things into processes. And in response to this, another gentleman chimes in regarding this, and he describes civilization as being damn near nouned to death. Nouned. And his little brother then added, don't forget the modifiers. I'm sure that you're along with me here in the parking lot, the studio, that most of the ones, the Kyroots, that get into things about modifiers, it brings about a certain sort of, at least brief time out there, everyone seems to be able to relax and go. See? I bring this up as just sort of a word to the wise, maybe a subtle warning. Those of you that just sort of ignore modifiers, you're playing around with the power of speech. You're getting distracted and think, well, who cares about that? And Kyroots said, there was nothing to lead up to this one tonight, I noticed. There were no other ones about kings, and so you just have to sort of listen. Majesty, the second word in the sentence, is started with a capital M here, which I'm trying to hint to would be connected to that which is running one's own internal intellectual, you know what. So the Kyroots says, the majesty of one's self rules over a movable kingdom. May I suggest to you that this refers back to the idea, the difference between that which is local and that which is universal. In the sense of universal, it seems to be paradigmatic, seems to be indigenous to a three-dimensional universe, as that ours seems to be. That there is that which is local and that which is universal. Man is local at his singular level. Human thought is local. That is why man must continually be a self-referring mechanism. That's why a man must continually tell you what kind of guy he is. It's not through stupidity, and it's not through some deranged sense of self-importance. It's the only way he can stay stabilized. It's the only way he has a point of view of any sort. It's the only way the intellect can work is to be local. It's local on this planet. It's local to his civilization. It's local to his religion. It's local to his culture. And above all, it's local to what? Him. Oh, okay. You know, because everybody's attitude at the ordinary level is, who the hell cares what anybody thinks except what I think? Now, I don't even care what anybody else thinks. That's what I think, if you want to know the truth. You actually think that? I said it, didn't I? I'm not sure I agree with you. Well, what the hell do I care? Well, see, now we're getting somewhere. We're getting civilized, and don't say, well, hey, they sound like they're on the verge of fisticuffs. Well, that's being civilized. Before men could talk, they killed each other. Well, they did until the first 2 or 3 guys. I'm assuming just the cannibalism never caught on. I don't know. But I'm assuming that they quit killing each other after the first 2 or 3 times, and one guy told another one, he was about to go over and kill somebody at the next cave, and another guy went, and went like, he'll make you sick. So if you can't eat him, what the hell's the sense in killing him? Which, by the way, is really dug down in here. Those of you that followed, did any of you hear the history the guy gave of the development of his own mind that started out? He called it the great scream machine, then it was the mean machine, then it was the dream machine, and then the scheme machine. It's the evolution of man. That's what I'm talking about right now. It is a man becoming civilized. But at any rate, I can assure you, taking the ordinary view of how civilization and evolution has worked, is that men originally killed each other so they could eat each other. But I'm assuming, let's just follow me, that they didn't taste real good. I mean, even now in finer restaurants, you don't find that much human meat on the menu. So we'll assume that they didn't. Then they quit killing each other, except over sex. Where you're in my cave. Still the basic 3 S's of the primary world. But you can't call it murder. They had to start talking before they could actually do each other harm. Now I know some of you say, well, hell, you don't call killing somebody harm? Oh, all right. But that's not real harm. That's not real harm. I mean, if they kill you, what are you going to do? You're going to holler, hey, I've been harmed? No. When you get to the secondary level, there was another Kyroot a few nights ago that, again, I noticed no one asked anything about, that it was pointed out in the secondary world to a civilized man, there are worse things can happen than being killed. It is. The further you are down your own nervous system, the more you live in the basement, is where the slasher movies, horror movies, even Edgar Allan Poe, who I understand finished down there the 8th grade, but people like him only got famous from bricklayers, from people who live in the basement, from people back down the evolutionary food chain, even if you're right contemporary with us. Because that appeals to them. God, what if this thing jumps out where the movies are? A guy with a chainsaw or a mask, he'll kill me. But notice, it's not either better or worse. But notice, I would guess. I don't keep up. I'm not an expert. But my guess is if they take surveys in theaters that slasher movies, these chainsaw movies, and all these, Exorcists, and all the horror movies, the Stephen Kings and that stuff, I would suggest to you, no offense to them, that you would find very few atomic scientists, people with PhDs in the audience. And they got their own game going about that. And that's the part of the process of civilization moving. It's only the point I was trying to get you to see, because it's true in you. It's only down in your own nervous system, and it's only, if you're going to look out in life, those further down the intellectual food chain, those who work at Fredericks of Inglewood and Fredericks of Birmingham. To them, the worst thing that can happen to you is death. But the more civilized you are, you're not even interested in that. The greatest funerals are held for the lower classes, as it's normally called. The more civilized, just the ordinary level, I'm talking about somebody now with even a revolutionary sense of thinking, but just at the ordinary level, the more intelligent, from their view, the higher up they are, the city food chain, the less they're afraid of death, which is why religion begins to peter out, for one thing, the more educated they get. Because the more educated you are, in the secondary world, the Kyroot was just direct and to the point, in the secondary world, there are things worse than death. Then I assure you that there are people who are on the verge now striving, politicking for a Nobel or a Pulitzer next year. And if they had their choice, somebody's going to kill you, or somebody's going to dispute successfully your research, you'll be ruined. You do hear me, that there are people, literally. We're talking about sane people, people of repute, people that are head of their department at Harvard or Oxford, that if they were literally faced with that, would probably say, well, kill me. Because I cannot be here and have somebody ruin my reputation. 60 years, this close to a Nobel Prize, and just because I fudged, whether they did or not, but the point that I am faced with either being ruined or being killed, hey, shoot me. That's what it would come to. Now back. The local aspect is what was the basis of this Kyroot. The majesty of oneself rules over a movable kingdom. If you're ordinary, the kingdom does not seem movable, though. That's why tyrants don't want to leave town. That's why you can explain it. Well, a man who is holding power out in a real kingdom out there, he's afraid to leave town because he comes back and they go, surprise, coup d'etat. You know, surprise, hey, welcome back, surprise, you're no longer dictator. And we got a new one. I know, it always fits. But up here, this thing doesn't want to leave town. You can't trust it. Well, up here, if it leaves town, that's like the old thing. I think it was that philosopher. She used to be a waitress over at a truck stop in Alabama. They used to say that she couldn't go along with letting her mind wander off because she was always afraid it wouldn't come back. Well, I know some of you don't care for philosophical humor. This, at the very crudest level, with an ordinary person, the king up here, the tyrant, cannot really wander off because the waitress was telling some truth. It's your mind wanders off and doesn't want to come back and sit down correctly. You can end up in a home. Or worse yet, they could make you a waitress at a truck stop. This, although it doesn't say it, I'm going ahead and put the words into Kyroot's thoughts. The majesty of oneself rules over a movable kingdom. You would have to be able to be, I guess, let's say fairly sane, enough to get by, that you appear to be all right the outside of the building, all right? But if your mind is not on a ramble, if you cannot wander off, if your kingdom is not movable, you're a tyrant, but you can't ever leave. That is, you can't ever consider any other idea and all the obvious things. You're stuck with it. You're civilized, you're sane, you're probably middle class. You're the sinews, the muscle, the heartbeat of the world. God bless you, one and all. Bye.